Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, we have Nick Shirley, of course, in California. The fraud that is being exposed there is not new to anybody. I think that's pretty evident. That's not the only state, of course. The SNAP benefits fraud is being exposed currently in Massachusetts as well. Also not surprising. And again, plenty of footage and video footage making the rounds on X and other social media platforms describing all of this. Voter rolls being, of course, completely corrupt. People who are no longer alive, living in particular areas, of course, where they never lived to begin with. And, of course, those individuals being on voter rolls and placing their votes, ironically enough, for Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and not voting for Donald Trump. Again, not surprising really to any of us, but at least it's getting out there, and even the asleep people are starting to wake up to some of this, which is not a bad thing. I do want to mention this too in regards to the Epstein files. As I've said before, and I certainly said it again in the last show, and this is one of those horses that I'm just going to beat to death, is that the individuals who are protesting ICE are sort of inadvertently, whether they know it or not, and they probably don't know it, are also, of course, protesting anything having to do with the Epstein files. They're one and the same. And as we know, again, voter registration and voter fraud is all linked to all of this as well. But anytime that you see these individuals, again, protesting, they're proving to everybody else who's awake that they're 100% brainwashed. That's number one. But they're also advocating for illegality, and they're advocating for child trafficking, child mutilation, human trafficking, you name it. They're advocating for all of it. I was in Hamilton, Ohio just the other day, again in Butler County where I live, and was passing by the courthouse in Butler County, and there were approximately a dozen protesters, all with signs. I took a picture of them, put it on my social media account so you can see it. Again, you know, they have the signs that say F ICE, F Trump, we need a nation again, and blah, blah, blah. Again, these are not well-read people. These are not bright people. They're in the mass minority, and they have no idea. And as they're standing there, and there's approximately a dozen of them, I drive back maybe, I'd say, less than an hour later, and there's maybe 4 of them standing there. So again, are they paid to stand there? Probably. Are they that dumb to just do it in the middle of a day anyway? Probably. But again, it really doesn't matter one way or another. These people don't know what they're doing. We know that schools are allowing this to take place. We know, again, endless workplaces are allowing their coworkers to do this kind of thing. And I think, again, the schools are the largest abomination because these are mandated reporters for child abuse. And here they are, weaponizing children, as they, of course, would say they never do, when in fact that's all they do, is weaponize children for their own political purposes, to ultimately, again, the irony, advocate against law enforcement who are going after child abusers, among other illegal individuals, of course, who are engaging in copious amounts of illegality. This should, again, prove to everybody that these environments are not safe for anyone. Now, I'll get into more education here in a little bit, but more specifically, again, even though it's all tied together regarding the Epstein files, this is rather interesting, and an interesting revelation in all of this, which, again, shouldn't shock people necessarily, but it is very, very telling, and I certainly would hope that it would be telling for anybody with a brain, is that of all of the emails that exist and the years in which they exist and the years in which they were sent, there are next to 0 emails that are sent between the years of 1999 and 2001. Now, why would that be the case? What happened in that general area as far as time is concerned and major events that we witnessed on the old TV? And again, with all of these emails being traded back and forth, where again it appears that even Jeffrey Epstein was using 2 separate email accounts and emailing from one account to another account. Not that he was emailing himself, as some people have said, but that he was emailing another email account at a separate location that somebody else would have access to. But why is it that little to zero, practically zero, emails exist between the years of 1999 and 2001? Now, I put this particular X post out on Gab, which came from a Chris Martinson, where he said it's just a complete coincidence that the DOJ has completely withheld all the Epstein documents immediately before, during, and after 9/11, right? And he has a chart breakdown of all of it. I put it on Gab, and someone said, well, this one must have passed through, and they found an email. I assume it's real, but it's from a Philip Levine to G. Max, which is probably Ghislaine Maxwell, and it was dated Tuesday, September 18th of 2021. And it simply says, "Where is the real pilot?" ? Again, it may not be a real email. It may be fabricated. But again, if you get on the Jmail website, for example, which is procuring all of these emails and categorizing them by people and dates and whatever else, and you type in the date range between 1999 and 2001, there are none that pop up. I think there's only 2 emails that pop up in 2022. If you go to 2023, there's maybe like 6 emails. But again, it's interesting. And I think, again, we know why this is happening. Because Israel was involved in 9/11. If there were communications back and forth between Epstein and others, then of course that would prove that to be the case. And then if they were asking anything about the legitimacy of there being so-called airplanes on 9/11, then they would have those emails too, again, describing any kind of a dialogue or disproving that there were planes on 9/11, which clearly there were not. And again, this is the kind of stuff that that's being hidden by endless people. So I don't think it's a good thing, but I don't necessarily think it's a full-blown trick, unless, of course, they put those emails and the emails that existed within that date range within this category, I should say, where they label it as, I mean, whatever they say, issues of national security, quote unquote, or matters of national security. That's why we can't release these emails within this date range, because, again, it falls under that purview. That's possible, because imagine what would happen if within those emails, the Anons got a hold of them, started putting them all over the internet, where it clearly shows that Jeffrey Epstein and others were laughing at endless other people about planes actually hitting particular locations when in fact that's not what occurred. That would be an issue of national security without a doubt, because then everybody would be pointing the finger at Israel. But since we know that, and since we've done those deep dives and we've watched those videos and we've combed through the evidence and the video evidence and, of course, the written evidence and everything else, because we know that, that means that the President of the United States who lived there at the time knows that. And, of course, very famously, Donald Trump is on video the day after 9/11 or the day of 9/11 on a local news outlet there in New York, and he's openly saying planes can't bring those buildings down. There had to have been explosives. Again, he knows, which means, again, if we know and he knows, then the military knows, which means Israel's back is against a wall, which is exactly why I think we're seeing the reaction that we're seeing from the old anti-Semitic arguments that are consistently coming from them, along with endless other arguments that are coming from them now. Again, certain politicians like Lindsey Graham going over there and saying that Israel is basically, I mean, what he said in his speech the other day was bizarre. He openly said Israel is planning all wars and all future wars, and all future wars are being planned here in Israel, as he's over there right now, or was over there when he made those statements. That's a bit bizarre. That's an interesting thing to say. Again, some people think that he's bought and sold, and that, he's, of course, blackmailed. That's undeniable, but that he's being controlled by good guys to even say particular things like that in an effort to wake people up. That's possible. I also just think that Lindsey Graham is a disgusting human being, and he's arrogant, and he believes that Israel hung the moon when clearly they didn't. And he'll defend them to the end of time because he's remarkably blackmailed. Again, with that said, you would have to handle Israel to some extent with kid gloves because of the brainwashing that exists over here and the amount of money that is directly tied to Israel when it comes to American businesses and certainly, of course, the so-called clergy and pastors and that Judeo-Christian nonsense and all of that. I mean, there's so much money wrapped up over here with Israeli influence that you've got to slowly strip this away over the course of time in order to take the power away from them. Now, I've always said it here that if you just aired on television IDF soldiers back during Operation Iraqi Freedom in the early 2000s, shooting American soldiers with sniper rifles from a distance and laughing about it, and this video exists. There's copious amounts of video about that exists of Israeli soldiers killing American soldiers. If that just aired on everybody's television and was properly identified, people would lose their minds. If people found out, again, the average brainwashed human being found out the role that Israel played in 9/11, as it's been publicly said on the record by numerous people, we would wipe out the entire country. And we would run basically every Zionist out of our country in the blink of an eye. But you'd have to think about the massive scale of that and what that would actually look like. Again, it's not that we're having trouble removing illegal aliens right now. I don't think that we are. We're having to find them and, of course, identify them and then detain them and deport them. But something on that kind of a scale, of course, can be certainly managed. Getting rid of all of the players who were involved in 9/11, I would love to see that happen someday in my lifetime. That would be a fantastic thing. And again, for those of us who are awake, we long for something like that, and we dream about something like that, but it might just be a pipe dream. Again, ultimately coming to the conclusion that all of the guilty parties affiliated with that, and who, of course, continue to be affiliated with it, that these individuals would be held accountable for their wrongdoing or their money laundering. I think that unfortunately might be just that. It might be a dream. Of course, Howard Lutnick himself has had a bad few days here with people digging up old 9/11 footage of him rubbing his face and allegedly crying about past victims that he had and the insurance companies that he was working with, and how, of course, 9/11 was the day he didn't go to work, and how he was seeking to basically, again, get insurance money for the victims who died, who apparently worked for him, who showed up to work that day and ended up, again, dying. He had something like, whatever it was, 700 employees or more, and he was bragging about receiving a $32 million insurance settlement as a result of the 700 some odd employees dying back then. Again, if you do that math, that's not a lot of money for each so-called family. That's approximately $45,714 per family. So again, he's happy about that back then, but there's 700 dead people with ruined families forever. I know it's not the kind of accountability, certainly, that we would like to see here on Earth, and I do think that there will be mass arrests. I still believe that. And there's certainly evidence pointing to that, of course, with the slow drip of the information that continues to come out. And of course, some have been held accountable while others are panicking, like Hillary Clinton. In fact, let me play a quick piece of audio from Hillary Clinton here. But before I do, again, I'll just basically wrap up the Epstein stuff here for now and basically just say again that these people are not going to escape God. Again, it's also quite possible, certainly given past executive orders, one in particular that Donald Trump signed, where, of course, the assets of the guilty will be confiscated by the government. And then once these individuals have all of their assets confiscated, well, if a particular deal gets cut, where they basically say, look, we'll give you a living wage so that you have a roof over your head, but at the exact same time, you belong to us now. It's quite possible that deals like that have been made. Again, I have no proof necessarily, but it's possible. But even so, that's not really the kind of accountability that I think the average American would certainly enjoy. Then again, you have to ask yourself, does the average American even grasp such a thing? Could they grasp the actual truth that there were no planes on 9/11 and who actually engaged in 9/11? I don't know. I just don't know if they would. But I think, again, that the Epstein file drip is just that. It is purposeful. It is designed to, again, wake people up and snap them out of it. That if you think that a particular activity that a person is engaging in, or that you are engaging in your everyday life, or within a particular season of the year or whatever, that you're doing that, eventually the activity will become disgusting because you'll end up finding out again what these kinds of people have been doing their whole lives. Which then, of course, you would hope would beg the question that a person would ask, which is, why does this frivolous activity, we'll use football as an example, why do people watch football when there are children being kidnapped, mutilated, raped, and murdered? And at the exact same time, the American school system is apparently advocating for all of this with their ICE protests. That should leave a bad taste in everybody's mouth who has a conscience, which, again, I think that that's continuing to happen. We're not hearing enough about that. We're not hearing enough about people waking up, but they are waking up, which is a good thing. Now, Hillary Clinton, when it comes to, this is hilarious too. This audio is astounding. And again, I think it's a perfect example of a narcissistic psychopath, which she clearly is. Why is it that she would be running to the cameras all of the sudden now? And certainly within that last conference where she was participating, and I've put some of those clips in the past war videos, but why is it that she feels the need with her and her fake husband to basically testify on the record, on television, in front of James Comer's committee about the Epstein files? And the answer is that she actually believes that if she associates just enough of herself with these kinds of people, but then denies any wrongdoing or denies knowing that they were engaging in wrongdoing, that somehow she believes, again, that she'll be able to talk her way out of it, or that she'll be able to trick people. That if I talk enough about this, then I can basically look at other people and say, well, why are they pleading the fifth? Or why aren't they up here talking about this when I am? See, I'm being cooperative because I'm not involved. And I had nothing to do with this, and I didn't know what he was doing, and I'm the one here talking to you and they're not, which means they're guilty and I'm not. That's what a narcissistic psychopath would actually believe. But she doesn't seem to understand that the vast majority of the public finds her repulsive, and that her behavior alone, indicates that she's a narcissistic psychopath with serious personality disorders. But she has a pattern here, does she not? She's done this before on the record with Congress all of the time. Whether it was, again, past elections, or it was Benghazi, or you can pick a subject. Again, her email servers. I remember Trey Gowdy back in the day grilling her about a number of different subjects, and she's cackling. She's laughing at the top of her lungs, like, I can't believe you'd even ask me such a question. I mean, it's ridiculous. But that's who these people are, specifically, again, Hillary Clinton. So here's her in some interview. She's talking to God knows who. Voice of Jess Parker. Here we go. News correspondent. There we go. This is Hillary Clinton, again, recently. I would assume within the last few days. And it's about 1 minute and 40 seconds long. Give her a listen here in 3, 2, 1.
We have no links. We have a very clear record that we've been willing to talk about, which my husband has said. He took some rides on the airplane for his charitable work. I don't recall ever meeting him. Did
you ever meet Ghislaine Maxwell?
I did on a few occasions, and thousands of people go to the Clinton Global Initiative. So it to me is not something that is really at the heart of what this matter is about. They are accused, and in both cases were convicted of horrific crimes against girls and women. That should be the focus. We are more than happy to say what we know, which is very limited and totally unrelated to their behavior or their crimes. And we want to do it in public because let's make this transparent.
There are calls for another individual who denies wrongdoing to go before Congress on this matter. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly Prince Andrew. Do you think he should testify?
I think everybody should testify. Look,
including the former prince.
I think everybody should testify who is asked to testify. I just want it to be fair. I want everybody treated the same way. That's not true for my husband and me because other witnesses were asked to testify. They gave written statements under oath. We offered that. They want to pull us. Why do they want to pull us into this? To divert attention from President Trump. This is not complicated.
She's right. It's not complicated. Because even a layperson can hear it in her voice. A layperson can hear the panic. Again, they have direct connections to Epstein. They have direct connections to child trafficking. That's what the Clinton Global Foundation was all about. That's what the Clinton Foundation was all about. And then, of course, they changed the name, the Clinton Global Initiative. That's because these people cannot give up their crime. They don't know anything else. The only thing that they understand is crime. And rape and torture and murder, and they engage in it too. Again, very famously, there's a Q post, February 14th, 2019. It's Q post 2725. It simply says, chatter, Bill and Hillary's public health will begin to rapidly deteriorate. Q. Again, it's not that every single post corresponds to a specific date to the T, again, in the future, but generally speaking, I think we're starting to see it. I think we're certainly starting to see the panic. It's always been there, but her back is against a wall, and there's really no escaping this. Her testimony and her husband's public testimony to James Comer's committee on TV is next week. I think it's the 27th and the 28th or the 28th and the 29th. It's next week. That'll be interesting. That'll be an absolute case study in narcissistic personality disorder and full-blown panic. I'm going to watch the entire thing. Again, after it occurs, I promise I'll bring audio clips and maybe even dedicate an entire episode to her. She's nuts. You can see it in her face. She looks demonic. Her eyes are huge. And again, the hand motions and the shoulders are up. And I mean, every nonverbal cue gives her away. If she were in handcuffs or a straitjacket, it would look different to people. But she's behaving the same way as if she was in handcuffs and or a straitjacket. She looks nuts. Now, I'm going to go back in time here just quickly regarding, again, Hillary Clinton. One hell of a story out there. Again, no one's seen what was on Anthony Weiner's laptop. But back in the day, again, we're talking about 2018, 2017, 2018, certainly 2018. That's when all of this, Hillary Clinton is a cannibal, and Hillary Clinton is a pedophile and a satanic witch, and all of this. Again, us back then, with just a little evidence, it didn't take much. We were like, yep, that checks out, no problem. We completely believe this. And again, with everything that's come out since, we of course are saying, I told you so. And there's ample evidence again to prove this. Again, not just that things like that occurred, and probably still occur, but at the very least that she was involved and certainly knew and hung out with the people who were involved. But there was a very specific story, again, having to do with Anthony Weiner's laptop and the amount of information that was on there, and how at least 9 New York detectives who had access to that laptop saw it. They were physically getting sick, and then they were suicided, as the story goes, that some of them maybe actually killed themselves or that they were murdered. Again, I tend to lean toward the murder aspect of it because, again, they've witnessed evidence that is beyond horrific with people that they recognize. The entire story having to do with Anthony Weiner's laptop also was that it was a giant blackmail honeypot specifically regarding Hillary Clinton, and that her name was all throughout that laptop and the information that was on that laptop and whatever else. There was also a very long-running story that was referred to as frazzle drip, which had to do with a file or a folder or, again, a specific video file that was on that laptop that involved essentially, again, the mutilation of a child's face, and Hillary Clinton, Huma Abedin, and or others eating portions of this little girl's face. There were even pictures that were making the rounds of a mutilated face at the time, and a number of other things. It's all satanic and it's all horrific, and that should go without saying. It's not a large leap, though. Not based on what people know now and the public information that exists now, which is exactly why the mainstream media isn't touching this with a 10-foot pole. It's all back and forth, left-right politics. It's, oh my God, Savannah Guthrie's mom's still missing. That's what you should care about. They don't want to focus on cannibalistic, pedophile, satanic, so-called quote-unquote elites. Because that would even, of course, bring down the media apparatus itself. Which, again, is why it falls on us to not only bring this information to people, but to encourage them to walk away from paying attention to those kinds of media outlets and actually learn about what actually goes on in the real world. Here's a 2-minute and 55-second clip of a guy apparently on TikTok, and he's, again, going through the Jmail website, which has the Jeffrey Epstein stuff on it, and he's commenting on the emails, and he's reading directly from the emails specifically referencing jerky, which, again, the direct implication is that that's human flesh. But listen to all these different connections and the names of the people that he brings up. Again, even to a layperson, you would have to say, wait a minute, there's smoke here. This isn't normal. There are too many so-called coincidences. And me personally, I don't believe in coincidences. I don't think they exist. But give this guy a listen here in 3, 2, 1.
And I'm going to apologize in advance because you may never look at jerky the same way. I sure as hell don't. So remember how I told you that the devil and his friends use lots of food words constantly in emails in context that made no sense? Pizza party and cream cheese being top ones? Well, there was one food word that these people seem to obsess over more than any other one, and that was jerky. Now, this could just be because maybe he was a jerky enthusiast and just couldn't get enough of it. I don't know, rich people are weird sometimes. Well, let's read some of these examples together. How about we do that? All right, so this is from Francis Derby to who knows. Good day to you both. Just checking in to see if the jerky situation has been sorted out. Last we spoke, you planned to have rich beef FedExed to Paris. Just so we're all on the same page, the jerky is shelf stable and can travel without refrigeration. And then we have Karina Shuliak asking Francis, JE is asking to bring him more beef jerky on Friday. Are you also flying on Friday? If not, I would like to collect it from you and take with me on the plane. Now, we don't know who this is from, but it's to the devil. Jerky will be with me when I get to ISJ. I can come tomorrow and take care of white tuna if you'd like. And we don't know who this is from, but to the devil again. Steve needs a 6 to 8 ounce portion of jerky. I gave you all the jerky we had, roughly 2 pounds, and it lasted only half the amount of time it was meant to. I felt it was more important for you to have the jerky, to eat during my time off. My plan is to make a batch before I leave for LSJ, and some of that will then go to Steve and the next to you at LSJ when I arrive. This one is from the devil to Steve Hansen. Hope you are feeling better. Did we analyze the jerky? Now, I'm not a big jerky guy, but do you normally analyze your jerky? Ready for this one? From Francis Derby, subject jerky. Just wanted to touch base about jerky. JE said he was going to start eating regular food again. Regular food again. So he might be eating less jerky. That said, he has 6 bags of it in the downstairs freezer for the next trip. Is beef jerky not considered regular food? And do you normally freeze it? I actually have no idea. Delicious lunch, beef jerky. He would get pissed when he didn't have any. Hundreds of these emails about jerky. This I thought was super odd. It's a picture of jerky. It was in the files. The FBI thought it important enough to take a photo of just one piece. But if that's not weird enough, that picture and file is no longer on the DOJ website. They deleted it. It's just jerky. Now, you might be wondering, who is Francis Derby? Because I thought the same thing. Well, not only was he Epstein's personal chef, he also owned an exclusive tiny little restaurant in New York City called The Cannibal. I fuck you not. Francis was even featured on Hallmark's YouTube channel. The video's still up, where he showcases how to make his famous cannibal burger.
We are back with Chef Francis Derby. He's the executive chef of Cannibal.
All right, this is where I lean on you guys. Am I nuts, or are you seeing and reading what I'm seeing and reading?
Sports ball activities and high school yearbooks don't seem all that important anymore, do they? I'll give you one last thought on this particular topic, and I think, again, that it encompasses almost every topic that's ever been brought up on this show, and certainly numerous other shows, and there are a million shows out there. So, again, I appreciate you listening to this one if you do. But I was lying in bed the other night before I fell asleep, and I was sort of overwhelmed with this feeling that when I was younger, of course, and I detested the school environment, and I hated the first day of school, and I always viewed that as being normal. I viewed those negative feelings about environments like that as being normal, a normal state of affairs. And what was alarming for me when I was younger, and even today, of course, you still see it everywhere, regardless of the environment, frankly, is the level of comfort that people have with environments that should be uncomfortable to them. But I remember, again, growing up as one ages, and you're consistently firm in your belief system, with your feet firmly on the ground, that what you are seeing is not normal, that the emphasis and importance that people put on particular things is not normal. And I remember, again, looking at these individuals, whether they were people I went to school with or people I hung out with, or, people who were whatever, close to me, and they said particular things, and I was like, that doesn't matter. It's things like that are reigning even more true today, that people like me, for example, were not crazy even back then when I was 5 years old. And walking around, again, these very odd environments that seemed unnatural to me, that was a gift. That it was just an innate gift given by God to give me the ability to see environments and be skeptical and pay attention to my surroundings and have my head on a swivel and not drink in everything as if it's the absolute truth, but to question everything. And then the moment that someone questions you questioning something and they get upset about it, well, that's a person who's either brainwashed, or that's certainly a person who isn't a critical thinker or looking at things the way that you are, which proves that there's two separate existences that exist here on Earth. That there is reality, as horrific as it is from time to time, but also as beautiful as it is. And then there's just this average malaise that exists among endless people, where again, they put an importance and an emphasis on things that do not matter. My hope and my prayer is that the more information and the more truth that comes out, that it becomes absolutely unavoidable. And that more and more people, again, start to shed their skin, as you've heard me say on the show before, so that they can at least have a chance at surviving. Again, you'd think that the lie of 2020 and all of that COVID nonsense would have done it for endless people. And yes, there are more people who have woken up to it, and that's fantastic. But there are still plenty of people who have not. And they're still plugged into the matrix and watching the news to get all of their information. And if the news doesn't bring it up, then it's not happening. That level of thinking is so destructive that they don't even know that that's going to lead to their early demise. Now, let me move on to this, because this is very similar. The 2020 election, same kind of thing. I can't believe that people still think that Joe Biden won that election and that election was 100% sound and secure. It couldn't be more fraudulent. Couldn't have been more fraudulent even at the time. There's a PDF document that I have now linked on my website, AmericanEducationFM.com, under the Government Documents tab. And when you scroll all the way down, that huge list of now 70 PDFs, it is number 70, and it is titled Summary of Election Fraud in the 2020 Presidential Election in the Swing States. And it is a glorious document. 32 pages long, all bullet points, and they go through the swing states specifically of Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Michigan. One bullet point after another for each state. Here's the introduction. It's only a page long, page and a couple paragraphs. Give this a listen here. It says the following, quote, "It's often been repeated that there is, quote unquote, no evidence of fraud in the 2020 election. In actuality, there is no evidence Joe Biden won. Ongoing investigations in the swing states reveal hundreds of thousands of votes were altered and or not lawfully cast in the presidential election. Joe Biden needed them. On election night, November 3rd, 2020, President Donald J. Trump was sailing to re-election with landslide leads in numerous battlegrounds. In Georgia, President Trump was up 12 points and over 335,000 votes, with 56% of the vote in at 10:17 p.m. In Wisconsin, President Trump was leading by 121,380 votes and 5 points at 12:12 a.m., which Fox News anchor Brett Baer noted was, quote, not a small margin. In Pennsylvania, President Trump was leading by 659,154 votes at 12:38 a.m., a full 15 points. In Michigan, President Trump was leading by 293, it says, 1,052 votes and 10 points. The election was over. However, precincts in Atlanta, Detroit, Philadelphia, Phoenix, and Milwaukee kept counting until the results reached the desired outcome, which was the opposite of the will of the voters. Georgia went from having a total of 4.7 million votes, already a record for the state according to Brad Raffensperger's count on November 4th, to certifying almost 5 million votes, or 5 million it says. This was 300,000 more votes than what the top elections official claimed were cast in the election. Getting to this result in Georgia and other states created an irredeemably compromised election, filled with violations of the Constitution, unlawful ballots, widespread broken chain of custody, electronic manipulation, and missing the corrupted election files that made it uncertifiable and impossible to recreate the results. President Trump was right to voice his objections to what had unfolded before the country's eyes. Republican poll watchers were denied access to the counting in multiple jurisdictions, and ballots were counted in secret in the middle of the night without media or observers present. Countless irregularities emerged, including reports of ineligible voters, voting machine anomalies, water main breaks, quote unquote, improbable percentages of ballots for Biden, and more. Since investigations across the country have uncovered an avalanche of irregularities, unlawful activity, manipulation of election records, destruction of evidence, and fraud. It says the findings, which are outcome determinative, are detailed in the summaries of the swing states, unquote. That's just the introduction, and then the first state they go to is Georgia, where it says, quote, it is a fraud to conceal a fraud. It's an amazing document. Again, it's footnoted, it's referenced. They've got everything right here in this 132-page document. So I highly recommend reading this. I highly recommend saving it to your own records, and hell, send it to a normie. Send it to somebody who actually believes that Biden won in 2020. Let them see this. It's undeniable. Because what it'll do is, at the very least, it'll soften the blow for what's about to happen regarding, again, the resurrection of that election and that fraud, and everything that's going to come with it. It's going to be biblical. There is no doubt about it. Now here's what I want to do. I want to move on to a brief little discussion here about AI, and I've got a couple of posts that I want to read. And how quickly, of course, artificial intelligence has been dropped on everybody, and how it's not new. This is something, of course, that endless governments, of course, apparently had at their disposal for a number of years, and then, of course, they just rolled it out to the public. Ironically, of course, after 2020, well after 2020, and certainly well after 2021, when people could have used it to their own benefit, certainly from a legal standpoint. But There's a particular Chan board post here, and this was from February 23rd of 2023. And again, you can take this with a grain of salt if you'd like, but given the fact that we know what we know now, and you go back 3 years ago, this certainly seems to make a great deal of sense. This was an individual apparently working inside of Meta, and they said the following here. I'm a Meta insider working on Project Lazarus. We're building an AI that can take over a deceased person's social media accounts and continue making relevant posts as if that person is still alive. This includes age-progressed photos, interacting with other people's content, and everything else needed so that the person continues on in the digital realm after physical death. We were originally told this would be a service offered to people struggling with the loss of loved ones and people who had missing children. Seemed like a decent idea. Things are getting weird now, and I'm having second thoughts about what this is actually going to be used for. The AI is extremely capable of impersonating people. It doesn't take as much initial input as one might think to train the AI how a certain person interacts with the digital world. It's very convincing. An entire island of people could go missing, and with little to no downtime, the AI could take over all of the social media, and the world wouldn't have a clue that life wasn't just continuing as usual. A lot of the project is becoming more compartmentalized. Things have taken a dark turn, it feels like. They've forbidden communication between people working on different things. Something isn't right, and I don't know what I should do. I'm not going to post any personal identifiable information, they said, but I will try to answer questions that won't expose my role within the project, unquote. Again, I don't have anything beyond that, but given the fact, again, that social media, of course, has the timers put on it, that certainly, of course, is something that people can automatically program within their own social media accounts to have particular posts go out at particular times, certainly over the course of months even, if not years. But to train an AI system, again, to do that for them, even after they are seemingly dead, that is, that's suspicious and certainly probably not a good thing. But with that said, that brings in this next account, which has to do with an article that was written at TechCrunch.com just back on February 9th of this year. And it says the following, it's titled the following: the first signs of burnout are coming from the people who embrace AI the most. It says the most seductive narrative in American work culture right now isn't that AI will take your job, it's that AI will save you from it. That's the version the industry has spent the last 3 years selling to millions of nervous people who are eager to buy it. Yes, some white-collar jobs will disappear, but for most other roles, the argument goes, AI is a force multiplier. You become a more capable, more indispensable lawyer, consultant, writer, coder, financial analyst, and so on. The tools work for you. You work less hard, everybody wins. They said, but a new study published in Harvard Business Review follows that premise to its actual conclusion. And what it finds there isn't a productivity revolution. It finds companies are at risk of becoming burnout machines. As part of what they describe as in-progress research, quote unquote, UC Berkeley researchers spent 8 months inside a 200-person tech company watching what happened when workers genuinely embrace AI. What they found across more than 40 in-depth, quote-unquote, interviews was that nobody was pressured, at this company. Nobody was told to hit new targets. People just started doing more because the tools made more feel doable. But because they could do these things, work began bleeding into lunch breaks and late evenings. The employees' to-do lists expanded to fill every hour that AI freed up, and then kept going. As one engineer told them, quote, you had thought that maybe, because you could be more productive with AI, then you save some time. You can work less. But then really, you don't work less. You just work the same amount or even more. Unquote. It says over the tech industry forum, Hacker News, quote unquote, one commentator had the same reaction, writing, quote, I feel this. Since my team has jumped into an AI everything working style, expectations have tripled. Stress has tripled, and actual productivity has only gone up by maybe 10%. It feels like leadership is putting immense pressure on everyone to prove their investment in AI is worth it. And we all feel the pressure to try to show them it is, while actually having to work longer hours to do so. The author goes on and says, quote, it's fascinating and also alarming. The argument about AI and work has always stalled on the same question. Are the gains real? But too few have stopped to ask what happens when they are. The researchers' new findings aren't entirely novel. A separate trial last summer found experienced developers using AI tools took 19% longer on tasks, while believing they were 20% faster. Around the same time, a National Bureau of Economics research study tracked AI adoption across thousands of workplaces, found that productivity gains amounted to just 3% in time savings, with no significant impact on earnings or hours worked in any occupation. Both studies have gotten picked apart. This one may be harder to dismiss because it doesn't challenge the premise that AI can augment what employees can do on their own. It confirms it, then actually shows where all that augmentation actually leads, which is, quote, fatigue, burnout, and a growing sense that work is harder to step away from, especially as organizational expectations for speed and responsiveness rise, according to the researchers. It says the industry bet that helping people do more would be the answer to everything, but it may turn out to be the beginning of a different problem entirely. Unquote. I can testify to that, I think. Certainly with the advent of AI and the ability again to use it as an advanced search engine and even a legal tool, I have no doubt, again, given my use of it in the past, certainly on Substack as a legal tool, to benefit endless other people when it comes to going after school districts legally and what ramifications you have. The wall that I have hit using it is not only in the amount of time that you're using it in order to arrive at particular answers, to again create whatever, specified scenarios and specific web links in order for your average citizen to use in their own defense or to use as a offense against a school district when it comes to illegality. And of course, the mass production of many of those articles, which I've produced a great deal of them. And yeah, I mean, it's evident that that takes time and certainly has taken more time than if I didn't have it. But at the same time, the problem for me is this. A person can use artificial intelligence all they'd like, certainly as a legal tool. At the end of the day, artificial intelligence is not the one that makes the legal decision. It's a human being. And in many cases, it's an elected official. And we know that elected officials, law enforcement, and all those mandated reporters and everybody in between, all of those people are interconnected. And if one of them is corrupt, well, then that usually means that many more are corrupt. And if one doesn't want to look into something that is a serious, again, infraction or illegal behavior that has occurred, then that means that more people don't want to look into it. And more people aren't going to want to be held accountable and certainly not look into those who need to be held accountable. So I'll basically tailor it like this. The human element ultimately ends up being the problem in all of this. It doesn't surprise me in the slightest that anybody would, certainly anybody, any of the tech bros who have pushed all of this, of course, and let's face it, it's government behind it to a great extent. But all of the individuals, again, who have pushed all of this over the course of the last few years, it doesn't surprise me that they would say something like, well, this is going to make humanity easier, and this is going to make your workplace easier, and it's going to make life easier, and you're going to have more time to do things, and blah, blah, blah. They would have to sell it like that because you can't sell it the opposite way. Well, as it turns out, you're going to feel the need to want to do more on AI, which is going to take more of your life away. You're going to see less of the sun. You're going to be outside less. You're going to be, chained to a cubicle for the rest of your life, and 1,000 other just horrific experiences that people have, whether they know they're having them or not. And then before you know it, you're addicted to this system, and you're addicted to having it give you information that could benefit you, so you think, within your line of work, thereby potentially leading to more money, which then, of course, is only going to lead to you back in that cycle of trying to use AI to produce more for your workplace. You're just going to be hooked to a robot for longer periods of time, thereby making you no different than the robot itself. You're just the tool of the robot. So there's that aspect. Then there's this aspect, which is one that I've brought up before, which I've even seen some recent videos about as well, is that, and this is a rather black-pilling doomer kind of outlook on things, although given the evil people, of course, that, do horrible things in our world, this isn't out of the question, I don't think. But that a great deal of stories transpiring right now are being dripped out to the public with all of these revelations for the purpose of a distraction, because artificial intelligence is ultimately going to replace the legal system, which means if something bad happens, then you can't actually hold a human being accountable. Now, believe it or not, I think it was Glenn Beck who I referenced actually said that many years ago, because someone told him that. Whether it was a judge, a lawyer, or whomever, someone who was well-versed in AI was basically saying this is where it's going. That these AI systems are moving in a direction where ultimately it becomes the legal system. So right now, if you think that you can't trust a corrupt human being to do the right thing, which we can't, what makes anybody believe in the future that you can trust a robot to do the right thing and hold the right people accountable? Again, in the wrong hands, it's not going to hold anybody accountable. Certainly not criminals. But there's also a flip side to that coin, which is what society is seeing right now, which is copious amounts of corrupt judges letting people off, whereas if a legally sound, just, one rule fits everybody, equal punishment under the law across the board for everybody with no discretion involved, no bias, racism, bigotry, discretion, whatever involved, then ultimately that would lead to, again, the right thing allegedly occurring in almost every single case, so you would think. For example, there was a black female judge. I'm going to butcher the case, but it was something having to do with the rape and or murder of someone, a female, clearly, at the hands of a black kid, whether they were a teenager or, again, just above the age of 18 or whatever. They were sentenced to something like 60 years was the most amount of time that they could get behind bars, and the judge gave this individual half that time, like 30 some odd years in prison, for the rape and murder of someone, where the person showed no remorse for raping and murdering this person. Again, that's a judicial problem. That's the judge's fault. They should have given them the death penalty, but of course, given the restrictions, the maximum sentence was 60 years, and they were like, nah, we'll give them half that. Just because I empathize with them, because I'm black, they're black, and it just so happens that I feel like their entire life shouldn't be ruined, even though they raped and murdered somebody who had a family and other people in their life that love them and XYZ. But we don't want to, again, satisfy the victims. We want to just satisfy the victimizer. I don't know the end game here for AI or where it plans on going. But that is a scenario, again, that has been laid out before, and I just wanted to bring that to people's attention again. So, yeah, it's food for thought, but like I said, in the wrong hands, it can be a very awful tool, because then it will just prosecute anybody and everybody who it doesn't like. For example, anybody that it deems to be an anti-Semite. We found an old post of yours from back in the day. That's 5 years in prison. Something ridiculous like that. That's where things would get crazy. Now here's what I want to do. I want to move on to this, and this has to do with what is referred to, certainly in the education realm and portion of the show. This refers to the Texas Education Freedom Accounts. And I want to describe what this is, and I want to start it off by playing a piece of audio from Greg Abbott, who I am not a fan of. I think that he is corrupt beyond a reasonable doubt. And I think that there is a sleight of hand that's being played with this. At face value, and I'll read a firm description of this and what it entails and what it does not. It's basically, again, just that. It's taxpayer accounts that Texas taxpayers can use, much like in Ohio, to take their own money that they would typically give to a public school system, and they can transfer that money over, that, again, property tax or whatever tax money, and transfer it over to another public or a private or charter school or religious school of sorts within the Texas border, so to speak, the state line border. This is being sold as a good thing for education choice and education freedom, school choice, whatever, however you want to phrase it. I think, though, that there's a trick in this that is not good. And I think I've found it, and I want to describe it. But before I do, I want to play Greg Abbott because, of course, he's on Fox News and he's touting it and saying that Donald Trump gave him a lot of support on this and this is a great thing. I think this is creating the opposite of the thing that I would advocate for. I understand, again, that it's good when it comes to within state lines. However, it's limiting individuals because it's still keeping taxpayer money from Texas within the state of Texas, and government is still controlling it. So it's not really freedom. It's just kind of the illusion of freedom within the walls of your own state borders. So here's Greg Abbott's description of this first, and then, believe it or not, I used Grok's AI system to get into the nuts and bolts of this, because I wanted to read the descriptions of this, because this is, I think, again, it's more limiting than what people might think at face value. So give Greg Abbott on Fox News a listen here, sadly, in 3, 2, 1.
Let's bring in Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who is leading this cause. Governor, great to have you on the show today. Good to see you.
Thank you, Aisha. Listen, this is the biggest and best rollout of a school choice program in the history of America. But it was not always easy. A lot of people doubted this would ever happen. And I had to campaign to elect Republicans to the Texas House of Representatives to make sure we had the votes to provide parents what they were already demanding. And that was a choice for the best education pathway for their child. This time last year, people doubted we could even get it passed. We did get it passed with, by the way, assistance from President Trump, who called in on the day the vote was cast in the Texas House of Representatives, and he helped get this across the finish line. And then, as you were kind of recounting, on day one of sign-up, which occurred earlier this month, there was a record number of parents signing up and applying for school choice programs, more than 42,000. And as of today, there are now more than 100,000 families that have signed up for school choice, making it the largest rollout of school choice in America. One aspect about that, Aisha, and that is what people say is that because of what Texas has been able to do, that means this could be replicated in states across the country.
I think the numbers say a lot, right? I mean, when you have 20,000 families that applied in the first 3 hours, and then you said 40,000 after that, the demand is there. But some of your top private schools, it turns out, actually don't want to play ball with this program. They're a little anxious about it. They don't know how this is going to work. What is your message to those private schools?
Listen, that's fine. There's no requirement that private schools be a part of this process. There are structures that the private schools have to participate in, but not extensive. Our goal is not to highly regulate what those private schools do, just provide certain standards to make sure that we will be getting the type of education product from those schools that we expect in the state of Texas. But that point aside, what we have found is even with the very minimal regulations on private schools that come with this package, most have actually chosen to be a part of it, but there's no mandate that a private school participate in it if they don't want to.
Okay. And you said you're hoping that this will turn into a framework that other states can use. I know there is demand out there in other states as well that are having problems with their public schools and their teachers especially. Governor, great to have you on the program. Thanks for coming on.
Okay, let me review very quickly what I've said in the past regarding the school system in general, specifically when it comes to enrollment and percentages in money. Just to kind of, again, just quickly review and get this out there. I've openly said that if school systems lose 11% of their population, then they will fold. They'll go bankrupt because they can't stay open. Or at the very least, if that doesn't happen, they'll have to completely restructure the size of their buildings. They'll have to consolidate their buildings, sell the empty ones, and then their district will just shrink. That's fine with me, and I'm 100% fine with that. But of course, if you've listened to the show long enough, you know that I want to see the entire system collapse. With that said, there's a couple of ways of looking at this. Again, it's not just a percentage in enrollment. It's also, of course, lost money. But that's no different with, again, enrollment loss. I mean, if they lose people, they lose money, and vice versa. One hinges on the other is what I'm trying to say. What this particular Texas Education Freedom Accounts program, which of course is state funded, is seeking to do, is it creates education savings accounts and initiatives designed to provide parents with greater flexibility in choosing educational options for their children outside of traditional public schools. Now, I've said in the past again that the school systems themselves will probably be left for the physically handicapped and the mentally disabled. If you think about it, jokingly, it kind of already is that way, is it not? But either way, joking aside, and not even joking, I'm being pretty much 99% serious. All of that still means that the school system would continue to exist. Unfortunately, with a program like this, depending on how you look at it, it's possible that this would both facilitate the collapse of the public school system, which is my hope, but also that it would allow the American school system to remain to an extent. And here's what I mean by that. Within this particular system, actually, before I get into the nuts and bolts of what this proposal is and what this, it's now law. It's not a bill anymore. It's actual law. Is in the past, in American school systems, again, having worked in it for 9 years, I can tell you unequivocally that this is typically how it goes, certainly when it comes to complaints. You have two groups of people who complain on a regular basis regarding the quality of education, quote unquote. And believe it or not, it's not the majority of the people who attend the buildings. The average students, and even the ones who get straight A's, and a lot of the ones who are in advanced placement classes, these are not the ones that are really doing the complaining about the kind of instruction that is being delivered, even though, by and large, the instruction is both fraudulent, it's a lie, and it's complete shit. But with that said, it's not even those students. It's the top tier of those students, the very peak, the very apex of those students that actually do the most complaining. But it's even not just those students, it's their parents. You're talking about, again, the anal retentive, my daughter has an 8.0 GPA, and we're just still not satisfied because you're not challenging Stephanie enough. I mean, it's those kinds of parents. Those are the ones that detest the public school system but don't want to pay for private schooling, either because they don't want to pay or there isn't a private school around that they think would challenge Stephanie enough. Therefore, they're stuck. And they're stuck within the so-called public school, talented and gifted, college prep, advanced placement, whatever acronym you want to use, AP, tag, blah, blah, blah. It's all of those things. They get stuck because, again, they don't see another way out. So those kinds of people, again, would remain. But the talented and gifted, again, AP, college prep, all of those other ones below that top tier who don't complain, they would remain within the public school system, even with a monetary incentive to leave, because they're satisfied. Their parents probably don't know any better. They'd say, well, yeah, I could get some money back and save taxpayer dollars and certainly my own money, and it would return to me and I could use it some other place, but whatever, I don't care. I'm just going to keep my kids in the system because I fear change and I don't want to deal with it. I mean, there's that lazy aspect of it as well. You go even below that, so to speak. Now what are you into? You're into the realm because, again, the talented and gifted kids are getting straight A's, so why would the parents ever complain, let alone want to leave the environment? And then you have, again, below them, you have the average students. Those that get A's, B's, and C's, and they get degrees, and then they're on their way. That group of students is the vast majority of students within school systems. That was me. That again, is the vast majority of people. Hell, they didn't even have talented and gifted classes back when I was in school. At the very most, they had college prep. I took a couple of those, and I can assure you, there's nothing college prep about it. It's horseshit. But even so, with that aside, what's the other group that you have within school systems then? You have the tag group, you have the upper echelon of the tag group where Tristan isn't having all of his needs met intellectually. I feel like Tristan could run this school building, but Tristan would kill me in the dead of night because we don't trust Tristan. I mean, you have those crazy students at the very top, which I've brought up before. Books have been written about those people. They're nuts. Again, they cry when they get a B on a paper, let alone an A-. These people are unhinged. But you have those, then you have the average tag students, so to speak, talented and gifted in college prep. Then you have the vast majority of the remaining students. However, there's another group, isn't there? And that has to do with, again, the physically handicapped, the special ed students. But that group of students is getting bigger. And the American public school system needs monetarily for that group of students to get bigger because the school gets more state funding as a result. However, the benefit with this TEFA group is that even for those students, the so-called special ed handicapped, if they remain within the public school system, they are the ones who actually do the vast majority of complaining from a legal standpoint and threatening of the public school system. You're not meeting my kid's IEP recommendations. You're not following the 504 properly. We're going to sue you. So that becomes a problem for the public school system. So again, this TEFA program is monetarily incentivizing everybody to leave the American public schooling system, which theoretically they should. Because if you have $30,000 coming back to you as a student with disabilities or an IEP participant, which you do in the state of Texas, why would you not leave? Why would you not go somewhere else? Here are the funding amount breakdowns for students in Texas under this program. It says the following here. Eligibility criteria. To qualify for TEFA, a student must be a U.S. citizen, national, or lawful permanent resident who is eligible to attend a Texas public school, charter school, or pre-K program. Now, right out of the gate, that proves one of my points from many years ago, which is that the public school system would then remain for illegal aliens. anchor babies. Because out of this program in Texas, it says you have to be a U.S. citizen, a national or a lawful permanent resident who is eligible to attend. Well, depending on how you look at the law, an anchor baby might be allowed or maybe not. But anyway, it goes on. It says this includes children of active duty U.S. Armed Forces members stationed in Texas. Parents must reside in the state. While the program is universal, open to all eligible students, priority is given during the application process to students from low-income households. Now, this is where it slides into them potentially wanting to maintain the public system, but only for a certain kind of student. And it's not the handicapped and the physically disabled. It's that middle group that I just discussed, which is the average everybody. We'll call them the AEs, if you want. It says students from low-income households, those qualifying for free or reduced price lunch programs, students with disabilities or special learning needs, including those with individualized education programs, IEPs, siblings of approved applicants. Once one child in a family qualifies, all eligible siblings are automatically approved. I can see problems with this. Simply because you're taking the so-called riffraff out of public school, and what are you doing then? You're putting them with a monetary incentive to enter the private school environment, which is the opposite or antithesis of what the private school environment is for. Which means, is it really going to help school choice, i.e., the specific private school environment, or is it going to degrade that over the course of time, thereby making everything communistic across the board, to where everything is the same kind of fight that you would see, whether that be a physical fight with fisticuffs or a legal battle within a public school where it wouldn't typically exist maybe in a private school. You will now see it in a private school environment. And the quality of a private school environment, even though, let's face it, they're not utopias by any stretch of the imagination like a lot of people think. But can you see that quality declining over the course of time? I certainly can. It says families apply once, and accounts remain active annually as long as requirements are met, with an intent to continue form submitted each year. Unused funds roll over indefinitely while the student participates. Well, what happens after your students are out of the system? Do you go back to being a property tax owning individual of the local public school system where you live to begin with? Do you just go back on the government dollar to continue to fund public schools? Here are the category breakdowns as far as funding is concerned, the funding amounts. It says the base funding per student is approximately $10,474 annually, but amounts vary based on child's needs. For example, standard eligible student would receive anywhere from $10,000 to $10,500. So every year, the parent would be able to take that money away from the public school system and give it to another private, Christian, or whatever school system, online school system that is only, again, sanctioned by the state. This disqualifies an Abeka Academy, for example. Abeka.com does not qualify under this, unfortunately. Because even though they are a national online Christian academy that is accredited and based in Florida, they're still offered nationwide. They would have to be only offered in the walls of Texas and the border of Texas in order to qualify if they were an online institution. It then says students with disabilities, IEP participants, up to $30,000. Certain pre-K students, up to $30,000. and then low income or special needs priority, enhanced base amount, exact varies by case, which means you're talking about upwards, way past $30,000 for low income or special needs priorities, which means the poorer someone is and the more handicapped they are, the more likely they are to take state funds to find their way out of a public school environment and into a private school environment. My question is, long term, and even in the short term, what does that do for private schools? But as Greg Abbott claims, you don't have to participate as a private school. Which means, given this potential flaw in the system, or purposeful flaw, we'll call it, if you're a private school in Texas and you know that you're likely to receive more poor and handicapped students, why would you? Why would you want that? I can't see a private school wanting that. I can see a private school saying, hell no, I want the public school to keep them because that's where they belong. And that's logical. That makes sense. Keep in mind, if you said that to the political left, their head would explode because they'd say, you're a bigot, even though this entire time they've never advocated for school choice. But now that it's available to them, if they don't get everything that they think they deserve, they'll lose their minds. But as a business model, if you're running a clean, competent, curriculum-driven, high standards-driven private school environment, whether it be Christian or otherwise, why would you invite in low-income and handicapped students with IEPs, 504s, and special needs out the wazoo? You wouldn't, because you probably don't have the means to sustain them to begin with, let alone have to now accommodate them once they show up, if you choose to allow it. And I think, frankly, beyond that aspect of it, being, again, remarkably detrimental to the current existence of private schools as people see them today, this system, this Texas Educational Freedom Act, does not accommodate individualized learning within the home. So that should tell you again that, of course, is government's enemy. Government's enemy is the child who learns at home on their own, free of government. You're not going to receive any government funds to fund your own personalized education within your own home, self-directed by you or your parents. If your parents are the ones doing the instructing, you don't get a dime from government, regardless of how handicapped you are. For example, again, I asked it whether or not something like a BECA would qualify. And again, the devil is in the details, because it says the following: a BECA does not qualify for full tuition funding or a tuition waiver under the Texas Education Freedom Accounts program if you're using it for parent-led or independent homeschooling in Texas. Well, that's what people use it for. Again, it's independent parent-led, which is what government doesn't want. They still want you wrapped around their waist to some extent. We need government. Now, I would still say that if a public school, again, or a private school rather, allows for something like this to take place, then you're rolling the dice as a current attendee of a public school, because you don't know what really private environment, quote unquote, you're going to be entering. Is it really going to be the upper echelon? I mean, you'd have to do your homework on that, but then, of course, you'd have to ask the question whether or not that particular private school has made themselves available to the TEFA program. Because if they have, the environment's probably going to change over the course of, well, a short amount of time. So again, it goes on with a BECA. It says it's based in Florida. Pensacola, Florida is their headquarters, not Texas. So it operates as a nationwide, virtual program without a required physical or administrative office in Texas. TEFA requires participating private schools, including virtual online ones, to be located in Texas, be accredited by the Texas organizations, have operated for at least 2 years, and agree to program rules like testing requirements for grades 3 through 12. So again, school choice, quote unquote? Well, not really. The TEFA really isn't school choice. It is if you want to choose to leave, but it's not independence from government while getting your money back. It's the illusion of school choice. Now, if there are online Texas-based schools that exist that have a curriculum and are accredited and whatever else, and they qualify, then yeah, I would say that's a healthier option for the individual-minded person who, again, wants to learn at their own speed within the confines and safety of their own home. I would always recommend that, while getting, of course, your taxpayer dollars back to you to help fund said education. But again, I think that this has too many angles that I can see as being problematic. Personally, I can see Muslim schools opening that claim to be private schools. You can see Somali schools opening, claiming to be private schools, and then taking advantage of this particular system to receive their taxpayer dollars back to then open up again their own schools. Now, I'm not against that, because if they want to segregate themselves, I'm all for it. That doesn't bother me in the slightest. But with that aside, I would even say again that it's maintaining the American public school system, because I just don't know what percentage of the average everybody's or the average everyone else who attends American public school systems are going to leave the public school systems. I hope that they do. And again, they shared the statistics there with Greg Abbott on Fox News that they had the largest enrollment that they've ever seen immediately. Well, that's fine. It just depends on where are they going. Are they going into the online environment at home, or are they going to then flood the public, or the private realm rather, and degrade the private environment more? Or are the vast majority of those students leaving the public school system, again, the upper echelon, the Tristans and Stephanies of the world, who cut themselves when they don't get an A+ on every single paper? I mean, it's things like that. So, yeah. All of this has to be taken with a grain of salt. As I've always said, leaving government and anything government touches is the healthiest option. It will always be. But when government reaches out its hand and says, here's thousands of dollars, and in some cases tens of thousands of dollars, in order to leave government system, but with a leash around your neck still tied to government, well, then you're not leaving government. You're leaving the illusion of it's the illusion of leaving government with a monetary incentive. That's all. And again, that's where the trickery occurs. So understand that this has been game played. People like this, something like this doesn't become law on a whim. They sat down and they wargamed this out to see exactly what would happen in the long run. And I think if I was to look at it not pessimistically or from a black pill standpoint, I would just look at it logically, is that it's logical that it would, over the course of time, create more private schools that would not be good necessarily. And certainly, again, they would still have to adhere to government regulation, certainly for funding, potentially. But it would make already existing private schools worse. That's my 2 cents. I could be wrong, but that's my analysis of it, and I hope that made sense to somebody. Okay. I'm going to end with this, ladies and gentlemen, a little comic relief. Let's get in the DeLorean and kick it up to 88 miles per hour and turn on the flux capacitor and go back to Rush Limbaugh from 12 years ago. The Reverend Jesse Jackson has died, and thank God for it, because he was a horrible human being. Jesse Jackson, I'll give him one piece of credit. He did say some things that were accurate. He, of course, criticized Jews in the Jewish lobby, and he was accurate about that. He also criticized other blacks for being the cause of downtrodden and criminally minded blacks, basically. And he would say that the problem is within your own community amongst your own. He wasn't wrong. With that aside, and that's all the credit I'll give him, he was a horrible, horrible person, and probably burning in hell. So, a reverend? I don't think so. Not when he was procuring women for MLK, not his real name, on the streets of Memphis and everywhere else where MLK would speak, to, of course, rape these girls, underage, I'm sure, in many cases, but endless other horrible race-baiting things, because, again, he was a grifter and a race hustler. And of all people, of course, not only did Thomas Sowell fully understand this and wrote books about this kind of race hustling and would reference not only Al Sharpton, but of course Jesse Jackson thoroughly, so did Rush Limbaugh. So just for a little comic relief here, I have a clip from Rush Limbaugh again from 12 years ago where a caller calls in from Birmingham, Alabama, I believe, and he asks Rush a couple of questions on Open Line Friday, specifically his Reverend Jackson impersonation, which I just did, which I also would laugh at when Rush Limbaugh would do it. And Rush provides the story as to how he created that impression. So I'm going to leave you with the words of Rush Limbaugh here, and yeah, give this a listen in 3, 2, 1, and I will catch you on Friday, ladies and gentlemen. Peace.
Open Line Friday, Rush Limbaugh having more fun than a human being should be allowed to have. Michael, Birmingham, Alabama. Great to have you, sir. Hello.
Hey, Rush. Thanks a lot for having me on your show.
You bet.
I've been listening to you for a year this month. My brother Patrick got me to listen to you. I've been hooked ever since. But I have 2 Open Line Friday questions for you. Question one is, I know you've been on Family Guy a few different times, and I was wondering, what was it like working with Seth and his crew? Did it feel a little hostile? I can imagine Seth was probably pretty professional, but I just didn't know if you got glares going in or if they would always give you a hard time or anything, or was it a friendly atmosphere?
It's always been much more than professional. It's always been extremely friendly and really respectful. The first time they called and asked me to lend my voice to the program, and I was able to do it with a high-speed phone connection, and they were on the other end of the phone doing the direction, and they were just as, it was Seth and one of his assistants, and they were just as complimentary and appreciative as anybody, maybe even more so. The last time that I appeared on Family Guy, actually spent a whole day in the studio with Seth. He was doing the other voices and I was doing mine. And the first time I met him, there's a little standoff curiosity, but that melted away, and it was there was no friction. There was no stress. He was entirely complimentary. He probably tells everybody this, but he said, this is some great work. You wouldn't believe what we get coming in here at people, want to get in here and get it out of here and don't spend much time. But this is just a great body of work. I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. It was over. And then we went over and did a video interview that would be used to promote the episode a year later when it ran. When I had my faux heart attack, which was not a heart attack, but that's what it was reported as being in Hawaii. One of the first 5 people I heard from was Seth MacFarlane. He was, in fact, the day I was out there actually doing the work for the episode that was about me, he was a little late coming in because he bought a house and it was being remodeled. And we were sharing stories about the pain and suffering everybody goes through doing that. I gathered it was his first time in a major construction project. And when he did the Academy Awards this past year, he was getting all kinds of grief, and I sent him a couple of notes, a couple of attaboy notes. So he wrote right back. I mean, I got a note back from him while they were going on. I sent him a quick text during the Academy Awards, and during a commercial break, he got back to me. So I haven't spoken to him since, but every time I have been around Seth MacFarlane, it has been entirely professional and much more than that.
Well, that's great. I can always tell. It always seems like you have such a great time, and he just never seemed like one of those foaming at the mouth liberals or anything. It's like, he's liberal, but I can still respect him.
Oh, no, I think he thinks I'm a nut. I think he thinks I'm one of them. Right. I'm one of those. But for the time we were working, he was a professional. The time we were working, we had a mutual objective, and he put it aside. It didn't matter. And he doesn't hold it against me. And I don't, the fact that he's a commie bastard doesn't bother me either. It really doesn't. I mean, I listen to these people talk about getting along and compromise, and so I do it every day with people on the left. I could write a book on how it's done, and the people I deal with. Because not very many of them, but the ones that I've got some decent relationships with them. But we don't talk politics. We've never ever talked politics. Never, not once. Just a couple of aside jokes. Like I gave him grief. How could you write this, thinking what you think? How could you possibly make me look good in this show? Don't you realize what's going to happen to you? And he said, "Let it happen." I love stirring it up. So it was fun.
That's great. I have one more quick Open Line Friday question. I've always noticed that whenever, I always laugh when you do this, you always happen to refer to the Reverend Jack that certain way, and I love it every time you do that. I was curious why you say it like that.
That's the way Mr. Buckley, William F. Buckley Jr., interviewed Jesse Jackson on Firing Line, his old PBS show one time. Multiple times, but the one time I saw it, Buckley sat in an office chair that it leaned back so far you thought he was going to fall over backwards on it. And he had a clipboard. He had his legs crossed. He had a clipboard, and in order to see his guest, he had to look down his nose at him. His head so high in the air, and he's looking, and you just know that he knows he's talking to a buffoon. But he's William F. Buckley, and so he's treating this guy with respect. And his normal speech pattern, tell me, Reverend Jackson. And of course, he'd ask the question that erudite way, and Jackson would come back with some of his rhyme mumbo-jumbo. It was just classically funny to me. And I never knew whether or not Buckley was trying to be funny with the way, could be pronounced everybody's names that way. I remember when I got in an argument when I appeared on Firing Line. The women in combat was the issue, and I made some joke that I thought was going to make him laugh uproariously, and he looked at me and he upbraced it. Come on now, Rush. We're talking about declared hostilities in one sense versus whatever. But he was. I think he was dead serious with everybody he ever spoke to. And I don't know that he was making fun of Buckley or Jackson, but I interpreted it that way. And I just, I'm a mimic. When I hear things that amuse me, I try to copycat them. And the way he said the Reverend Jackson, it was just, to me, hilarious. And part of the deal was that Jackson didn't react to it, just answered with his mumbo-jumbo rhyme stuff. While Buckley is Mr. Erudite, classic communicator. And I thought the contrast of that could not have been greater. I don't think Jesse Jackson understood one question that Buckley asked him by virtue of his answers.
Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.